December, 1944. Somewhere in the Philippine Sea, a Japanese cargo ship moves alone at night. No lights. No escorts. Its captain knows the rules. Change course unpredictably. Reduce speed at intervals. Pray. Because beneath the surface of the Pacific, something is hunting. It does not roar like bombers. It does not fire artillery barrages. It does not announce itself. It waits. And by 1944, more than 60% of Japan's merchant fleet was already at the bottom of the ocean. Not destroyed by carrier battles. Not sunk in dramatic surface engagements. But quietly, methodically, by American submarines. This is the story of the weapon Japan feared more than anything else. Because it did not just sink ships. It strangled an empire. When most people think of the Pacific War, they imagine aircraft carriers, island invasions, Marines raising flags over volcanic rock. But Japan was an island nation. And island nations live or die by shipping. Before the war, Japan imported the majority of its oil, iron ore, bauxite, rubber, and food supplies from territories across Asia. The Japanese Empire stretched across thousands of miles of ocean, and every mile required transport. Ships were the arteries. Without them, the empire would suffocate. In 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, its submarine force was considered elite. But Japanese naval doctrine focused primarily on attacking warships, not merchant shipping. The United States chose a different strategy. Within hours of the Pearl Harbor attack, American submarines were ordered to begin unrestricted warfare against Japanese shipping. No warning. No hesitation. Every transport ship became a target. At first, the results were disappointing. American torpedoes were unreliable. The Mark 14 torpedo often ran too deep or failed to detonate. Submarine captains reported perfect firing solutions that resulted in harmless impacts. It was frustrating. It was dangerous. But the United States corrected the problem. By 1943, torpedo defects were largely resolved. And when they were fixed, the Pacific became a graveyard. American submarines represented less than 2% of the U.S. Navy's personnel. But they would account for over 55% of Japanese merchant shipping losses during the war. Let that sink in. 2% of the force. More than half the destruction. This was not luck. It was strategy. Unlike dramatic surface battles, submarine warfare is patient. American submarines operated in wolf packs and solo patrols across critical shipping lanes, the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the waters around Formosa, the approaches to the Japanese home islands. They waited near choke points, near straits, near convoy routes. And Japan's shipping routes were predictable. Because they had to be. As early as 1943, Japanese shipping losses were mounting. But by 1944, the situation became catastrophic. American submarines sank tankers carrying precious oil from the Dutch East Indies. They destroyed cargo ships transporting raw materials. They targeted troop transports reinforcing island garrisons. Every sinking created ripple effects. Factories slowed. Aircraft production stalled. Fuel reserves dwindled. Remote island garrisons became isolated, starving and undersupplied. The Japanese Navy could build ships. But it could not replace trained crews or imported oil fast enough. And without oil, fleets do not sail. Airplanes do not fly. Armies do not move. There is a reason Japanese naval officers later admitted that submarines were more damaging than American aircraft carriers. Carriers win battles. Submarines win economies. By 1944, Japanese convoys required heavier escort protection. Destroyers and escort ships were pulled from other duties to protect merchant vessels. But escorting requires fuel. Fuel that was already scarce. And even with escorts, American submarines adapted. Improved sonar. Better radar. More aggressive tactics. Japan never fully developed effective anti-submarine warfare comparable to the Allies in the Atlantic. The imbalance grew. The ocean turned hostile. One of the most dramatic examples of submarine effectiveness was the sinking of the Japanese aircraft carrier Shinano in November 1944. The Shinano was one of the largest aircraft carriers ever built, converted from a Yamato-class battleship hull. She was heavily armored and designed as a support carrier. On her maiden voyage, she was torpedoed by USS Archerfish for torpedoes. Within hours, she sank. A massive warship, destroyed not by a fleet, but by a single submarine. The psychological impact was enormous. If even capital ships were vulnerable, what about cargo vessels? By early 1945, Japan's merchant fleet had been reduced by more than half. Food shortages intensified in the home islands. Industrial output plummeted due to lack of raw materials. Oil reserves fell to desperate levels. Japanese pilots in 1945 often trained with minimal fuel. Some flew with limited hours compared to earlier war years. Not because Japan lacked courage. Because Japan lacked gasoline. And gasoline lay at the bottom of the Pacific. The submarine blockade did something even more devastating than sinking ships. It created isolation. Island garrisons in places like Rabaul, Truk, and parts of the Philippines found themselves cut off. Supplies stopped arriving. Reinforcements dwindled. Ammunition became scarce. American strategy increasingly bypassed heavily fortified islands, allowing them to wither. This tactic, sometimes called island hopping, worked because submarines ensured those bypassed forces could not be resupplied effectively. Isolation became a weapon. And submarines were its enforcers. By mid-1945, Japan's shipping losses reached staggering levels. Approximately 8.1 million tons of merchant shipping were destroyed during the war, the majority by submarines. The empire that once stretched confidently across Asia could no longer move its own resources. It was not defeated in a single battle. It was strangled. Slowly. Relentlessly. Silently. Japanese captains began sailing at night without lights. Convoys zigzagged constantly. Some ships hugged coastlines in desperate attempts to avoid detection. But American submarines improved radar capabilities and coordination. Patrol lines tightened. The ocean offered fewer hiding places. Fear became constant. Because the most terrifying weapon is the one you cannot see. Aircraft can be heard. Artillery can be predicted. Submarines offer no warning. Only impact. When historians evaluate why Japan's defeat became inevitable, they often focus on atomic bombs or massive air raids. But by the time those events occurred, the economic foundation of Japan's war effort had already been shattered. Factories without raw materials cannot produce. Aircraft without fuel cannot fly. Navies without oil cannot sail. Submarines ensured all three conditions were met. And they did so long before the final bombs fell. In retrospect, Japanese naval officers acknowledged that the submarine campaign was one of the most decisive factors in their defeat. Not glamorous. Not widely understood by civilians. But strategically lethal. American submariners endured long patrols, cramped conditions, and constant danger. The Pacific was vast, but depth charges and mechanical failures were ever-present threats. It was not an easy war beneath the surface. But it was effective. And effectiveness wins wars. By 1945, Japan faced a grim equation. Shipping destroyed. Fuel gone. Industry declining. Island garrisons isolated. The empire that had expanded rapidly in 1941 could no longer sustain itself. The strangulation was complete. The Pacific War is often remembered for spectacular battles, Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima. But beneath those battles, beneath the waves, a quieter campaign was determining the outcome. American submarines did not simply sink ships. They erased mobility. They erased supply. They erased endurance. And when endurance disappears, so does victory. In the end, Japan did not fear American submarines because they were loud. They feared them because they were invisible. Because every time a ship left port, it might not return. Because every convoy could vanish. Because the ocean itself had turned against them. And once an island nation loses control of the sea, the war is already lost.